I've seen many stories of amateur game designers who are just setting out to design their first game. And there's two roads that you usually go down with regards to deciding what dice system to use. I think probably the most common road is to use whatever dice system they are accustomed to. So a lot of people get started in D&D, so they think D20 plus modifier versus target number, or a DC, if you will. This is a very common approach for new designers who probably don't have that much experience outside of the D&D family of games. It is sometimes replaced by, I want more granularity in my dice system, so I'm going to do D100s or percentile dice. So it's a D100 system. And then I just multiply all of the modifiers by 5, so it goes up in increments of 5, so it's the same thing as a D20. So sometimes they have the wherewithal to figure out, like, probably don't just have all modifiers be a multiple of 5. So you can actually take advantage of the granularity of a D100 system. But, I mean, ultimately, if it's a D100 plus modifier versus target number, that's kind of the same thing. It's the same thing as a D20, just slightly more granular. But it's fundamentally the same mechanic. But there's a lot of different dice mechanics out there. There's lots. Like, I don't have time to name them all. Like, my videos are not going to be that long. There are so many. And they come with pros and cons for each one. Strengths and weaknesses. And reasons why you may or may not want to use them. And I think examining some of those could be helpful for a new designer. What I see sometimes on game design subreddits is the statement that, oh, your dice mechanic doesn't matter. Do whatever, like, feels right to you. I disagree with that fundamentally. I think that is actually that is unhelpful advice, to the point of maybe even being harmful to a new designer. Because if they get that stuck in their head, it's going to be hard to get out. I think the dice system does matter. It matters a lot. But I do think that if you are setting out to make your own RPG, and one of the first questions you ask is, what dice system should I use? You are asking the wrong question. Because the dice system should follow... So either you should know what dice system you want and design a game that works for it, or you should know what kind of game you have, and it should be fairly obvious what kind of dice system is going to work for you. And I am, of course, here assuming that you are making a game with dice. Obviously, there are diceless RPGs out there. I know. But most RPGs are going to use dice. And probably if you are a first-time designer, stick with the kinds of mechanics that you know and just use dice. I tried once to make a diceless RPG, and it worked out okay. My players want to roll dice. They didn't have as much fun with it as they did just rolling dice. People like to roll dice, so, like, fine. I'll make games where you roll dice. Like, I get it. Like, it is fun, yeah. Who doesn't like rolling little mouth rocks? But clickety-clacks. So I want to go over a few different dice systems and the pros and cons to maybe give you like a look at the sorts of things that different dice systems can do. And so maybe give you a look into how to analyze dice systems when you see them. We've got a few different ones that I personally really like. I like dice pools. I like when the number of dice that you roll can change based on circumstances. Either because, like, you have a higher skill, so you're rolling more dice, or you spend resources to roll more dice, etc. And this is not I'm not talking about like a 5e advantage type situation where, if you have advantage or disadvantage, you roll 2 dice and take either the higher or the lower depending on what you have. I'm not talking about that. I mean, like, each die operates independently, or it is built into the system that you are going to be rolling a variable number of dice. It is a different thing than just sometimes you roll twice and take the higher or the lower. So Blades in the Dark does this, obviously. Mouse Guard does this, which Mouse Guard is based on the Burning Wheel system. So the Burning Wheel system, I assume, does this. Mouse Guard is the only version of that system that I have played. Let me think. Modiphius's 2d20 system, despite being called 2d20, you often roll more than 2d20s, but you always roll at least 2d20s. And Modiphius, the 2d20 system is actually really interesting because it combines another aspect of a dice system that I really like. I think I've talked about this before, how they combine dice pools and roll under, where the target number is based on your stats, and you always just need to roll that number or lower. So higher stats mean more likelihood of success, and the target number is always is static. It's irrespective of the number of the difficulty of the task. So either the difficulty of the task is not relevant to the roll, like some RPGs don't care about difficulty. Blades in the Dark does not care about difficulty. It has other knobs for the GM to adjust to match the narrative, but difficulty is not one of them. All tasks that use the same stat are going to be the same difficulty. You have the same odds of success. Roll under systems generally do this. Some try to get away with doing a modifier to your skill before you roll. I think that kind of defeats the purpose of a roll under system, which is to keep it really snappy. Like, you always know what number you need. You roll the dice, look at your sheet. Am I this number or lower? Success. If I'm higher, it's failure. Like that sort of quickness, the intuitiveness, the sort of there's no math involved. All you need to know is higher or lower. That's it. So roll under systems have a lot of advantages in ease of use. What you'll find is that in order to incorporate difficulty, you either have to kind of defeat the purpose of roll under, which I'm obviously not a fan of, or you have to incorporate dice pools, as Modiphius did, where you're rolling multiple dice, each of them succeeds on target number or lower, and you need to get a certain number of successes. Here's the tricky part. When you are combining a system where the number of dice you roll and the target number of the dice can both change, the possibility space in there is humongous. It is, in my experience, practically unmanageable unless you have very, very tight controls on it. And I don't have enough personal hands-on experience with the 2d20 system to say if that is the case there. I kind of think it is, because from what I remember, what little experience I have, the target number didn't change that much, and the number of dice you rolled did not change that much. So the degrees to which you could adjust these two axes of the roll didn't really vary that much, but they could both vary. I tried to make a system where they varied quite a bit, and it was super unmanageable. I saw pretty quickly, this is not going to work. The math on this is too wild in too many different directions. I'm not going to be able to make this work. So I abandoned that direction of design and went in other directions. And that was a long, long time ago. So rolling under, very easy, but harder to incorporate difficulty, which is not necessarily a problem in some genres of games. Sometimes the difficulty of the task is not an important part of the task. Dice pools are really good for non-binary resolutions because they can give you a variable number of successes. Combining these two, one does solve the other, but it makes it mathematically tricky to make sure everything stays in line. But dice pools by themselves, for example, Mouse Guard, which if I recall correctly, it's either 4-ups or 5-ups. It's either 4 or higher or 5 or higher that generate successes. And so you just roll the number of dice equal to whatever your skill rating is, and count up the number of successes. If I'm recalling correctly, now, mind you, it's been a decade since I played this. I can't remember if you need only ever one success, or if the number of I think the number of successes did matter. So higher difficulty things could require more successes. I think I might be misremembering that. I'm not sure. Anyways, dice pools are sort of inherently good for variable numbers of successes. So if you want to have a system where sometimes you succeed more, sometimes you succeed less, or if you want to be able to adjust that difficulty in there without making so here's the really cool part about dice pools. Humans are really bad at estimating the chance of success on most dice pools. Unless you keep the numbers like, each die has a 50% chance of success. Like, you can kind of do that math in your head, because that's just powers of 2. But if, like, let's say each die has a 1 in 3 chance of success, or 1 in 6 chance of success, or something like that, what are the odds of getting 2 successes on 5 dice? Like, that's harder math to do if you're not used to, like, running probability in your head. And so it obscures what the likelihood of success is, which is good for some players if they want to only have a sort of intuitive sense without knowing what the numbers are. And that's important for some people. Personally, I don't really care if I know what the numbers are. If the math is simple enough, I will do it automatically. But like, it doesn't bother me either way if I do or don't know. Some people prefer to know, and some people prefer to not know. So, keep that in mind. You've got, what are some other interesting dice systems that we've got? Film Blades in the Dark. Lancer does use a D20. It has an interesting, like, advantage-disadvantage system where it's called accuracy and difficulty. So for every accuracy, you add a positive D6, and every difficulty, you add a negative D6. They cancel out 1 for 1, so you just roll whichever you have more of, and you roll the difference. And it either adds to or subtracts from your roll equal to the highest value rolled amongst those D6s. I have a little bit of experience with this. I ran about, 4 or 5 sessions of Lancer fairly recently. It's an interesting little system. I don't know that it necessarily, like, has a lot of great advantages. It's easy to do, I guess. That's the big advantage of this. Instead of adding, like incidental +1s, +2s, anything that makes you more likely to succeed just gives you an accuracy die. What makes you less likely to succeed? Give you a difficulty die. It's easy to apply these very intuitively, and you can sort of hand them out without much thought. But they are kind of a big deal. If you have any accuracy or any difficulty, it's going to modify the roll by a fairly significant amount. 3 on average, 3 or 4. That's kind of a significant blow. And once you start getting multiples, the chances of rolling a 6 kind of come up a lot. So they can, it's a little less granular than I think I usually prefer, but the trade-off is that it's very easy to use. Like, I don't have to do a bunch of math, adding multiple numbers together to create a larger whole. It's just very easy to, roll the D20, roll however many D6s, take the highest, It's very easy to do. And that's kind of the thing that I think might be a pattern in a lot of the RPGs that I like, is that it's very, like, they are very quick, like, very easy to run through. You don't do a lot of math once the die has been rolled. You might do math, like, on the character sheet to determine, like, what your target numbers are, how many dice you're going to roll, etc. But for the most part, once the die is rolled, it should be extremely easy, like maybe no math done at all, in some cases, in order to determine if you have succeeded or how much you have succeeded or whatever, what the outcome of the roll is. Another dice system that I would like to mention real quick, although I don't know that I'm going to be able to say much about it in this regard, is, of course, you have bespoke dice like for Legend of the Five Rings or Genesis, or you might know the Genesis dice better as the Star Wars dice, the Edge dice. It's the same system as Genesis, but one is brand name Star Wars and the other is not brand name. And they are different symbols, but I believe the distribution is exactly the same. So it's the same mechanics. Legend of the Five Rings and Genesis both use dice pools, and I think they use them maybe better than any other game that I've played, because they have not just a variable number of successes, which can factor into, degrees of success and the overall effect of the roll. They also have a secondary track. And I talked about this in my non-binary resolutions video, which was kind of a long time ago at this stage. But I'm going to talk about it again here. This, like, the advantages or the opportunities, as they, I think, are usually called. Opportunities as this, like, side thing, this, like, resource that you spend when you roll dice, which also came up when I talked about, like, on-roll effects. It can be problematic, so you got to watch out for that. If you allow too many rolls and players can just generate resources and spend them on things that probably should be a little bit more narratively impactful. You got to be more careful about how often you're allowed to roll these dice. But the fact that it gives you these sort of like side narrative benefits really opens up the possibility for some really cool storytelling moments. The little details that you might notice that the party didn't know to look for. Like, no player knows to go look for the hidden thing in the office, but they're doing something else in the office. They're like, interrogating someone. Someone rolls an opportunity, says, I want to notice something in the room. I'll spend an opportunity to do that. Yeah, there's a little clue right over here that maybe I just made up. Maybe, like, they wanted something cool. I didn't have anything prepared, so I'm just going to make something up on the fly and put it in there. Oh, cool. We now have this, like, cool story moment. Or maybe I did think about it, and I wasn't quite sure, like, if they were going to go looking for it. If they did go looking for it, maybe there would be a role involved in that, but they didn't. I kind of want them to know it. Like, it's a great way to give out information or to do other things regardless of whether you succeed or fail on the roll, because it's a separate resource than successes. And that's really cool. Both Genesis and L5R both do that. And I'm a big fan. Yeah. What else? You have combinatorial. Is it combinatorial? Let's not say combinatorial. I don't think that's the right word. Combination rolls. L5R does this. Fabula Ultima does this. And Modiphius does it a little, kind of. I don't like the way Modiphius does it as well as the other two. Any dice system that incorporates two different stats into a single roll, I think is really neat. I think it opens up the versatility of the system tremendously compared to each roll being only tied to one stat. I think that's just super cool. So Fabula Ultima does it by, you have two stats on each roll. You roll dice according to what stat you are rolling, and then you add them together, which is pretty simple. And then L5R, you roll ring dice equal to the value of the ring that you're using, which represents your approach, whether it's, like steadfast, direct, impassioned, subtle, charming, instinctive, these kinds of descriptors for each of the elemental rings. And then you also roll skill dice if you have ranks in the skill that you are rolling. And then you keep a number based on the ring that you're using. People can assist you to add more skill dice, which are better dice, but the skill doesn't add to the number that you can keep. And you can also generate a strife, which is like a resource that you have to spend to keep dice that are showing strife results. It's so cool. It's so cool. It's my favorite game. It's my favorite RPG. Where was I even going with this? Right. Combination mechanics. I love dice systems that combine two stats together into a single roll. I think I don't think it would be a problem if every RPG did this. I don't see any drawbacks to this as a concept. Like, obviously some RPGs are not built for it, but I think if they were rebuilt to incorporate an idea like this, it would only improve games. Because it gives both the player and the GM tremendously more options to express like how a character is doing something more than just what they are doing, which is, I think, the big deal. The next game that I'm working on after I publish what was called Legends and Lore, I'm not calling it Legends and Lore, I'm still kind of workshopping names. After I publish that, my next game will have combination dice, or a combination dice mechanic. I've got to have. I'm as soon as I started seeing this in like multiple games and seeing the different ways that it can be expressed, I fell in love with the idea. And so it will probably be in every game that I make from here going forward. So anyways, those are a few of my favorite dice mechanics. If you're on my Discord server, you'll notice that I mostly am talking about the games that are featured in that server. They have their own channels because they are my favorite RPGs. Because I like these dice mechanics. And I think that's just a lot more interesting than dice plus modifier versus target number, which has so many limitations. Like, it's very direct. It's intuitive. It's intuitive to understand, but it's so locked down that it becomes kind of a burden to design around. You know what I mean? Anyways, that's my take on dice systems and what I like about them and what I might not like about them.